Hello and welcome again to One Starfish, where our mission is to change the world one starfish or one person at a time. As always, guys, make sure to rate, review, subscribe. I love when there's reviews. They're fun to read and good feedback. Today, I'm really excited for our guest. I just met Sam. He's in South Carolina. I'm in the cold. He's talking, it's not that cold there, so I'm a little bit jelly here. But he's a husband, first of all, husband and father. That's his primary thing, which is really cool. Into business coaching, came from construction from what I gather, and went in 10 years sober. So he's got quite a story. So I'm excited. We chatted really briefly before, but I want to get into it with all of you guys. So thank you so much for being on today, Sam.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, let's dig into things. I'm already I just want to dig into things. So you got into business coaching. You're 10 years sober. Start with wherever, where did your life really start to switch, and what was it like, let's go back to growing up in the life of Sam, and where did it start to switch to who you are today? Because there's been some major switches.
Yeah, there have been many. I like the term Hall of Fame moments. There have been many Hall of Fame moments that have been put in the registry, so to speak. So yeah, growing up, I actually grew up in New Jersey, in a really, really nice town, a really, really good school system. And when I was 5 or 6 years old, my parents split up. Now, I want to preface, or it's not a preface since I'm saying it afterwards, but I would like to clarify. I think that my parents probably had the healthiest divorce in the history of divorces. Now, the process of it was not. There was fighting. It was very typical middle-class American divorce situation. But what my mother and father did was make an agreement that they would always have a solid friendship for my sake. And so my mom got remarried and had 2 more kids, my brothers, who I love dearly. But we had a weird, in comparison to other divorced families, we had a weird situation. My father came to my mother and stepfather's for Christmas dinner and Thanksgiving and New Year's. And we did all the things. They did everything in their power to keep me as healthy as humanly possible. Now, by the time I hit 13 years old, I did everything in my power to keep me as unhealthy as humanly possible. Okay. So as I go into some detail there, I always like to say that because
because people are like, oh, that's why, because you had this divorce and you poor person, and
and I think we as a society go really, really deep sometimes on blaming our parents for things. And yes, there's an absolute nurture situation that affects so much of our psychology, but I like to own the decisions that I made, especially the bad ones, because they really were my decisions to make, even if my thought processes were a little broken. And so I had a pretty healthy childhood, all things considered. I was a big kid. But even then, there was no horrific, tragic bullying, right? Some normal teasing. I always had friends. By the time I hit teenage years, like a lot of teenagers, I became incredibly uncomfortable in my own skin. Insecurity, discomfort. I was, for lack of a better way to put it, I was the fat kid. I was very overweight. I mean, I was 180 pounds in 7th grade. I was a big boy. And in that process of growing up is where really I've backtracked this in my 10 years of sobriety, but right around that time is where I learned how to start comparing myself to other people. And how to start wishing I was like other people, and how to start finding ways to get outside of my reality. So I talk about it all the time. I'm not, drugs and alcohol were not my first addiction. It was food. It was television. It was even hanging out with friends, anything that distracted me from taking a look at myself, feeling the feelings I was feeling, because I didn't know how to process. Now, my parents did an amazing job keeping everything as unified as possible. What they failed to teach me, and I don't think it's for lack of trying, I think they just didn't know, but how to identify and process feelings. Something that my dad's parents were immigrants. He was born in the 50s. Processing feelings wasn't really part of the deal. You just went to work and came home angry. And that was kind of and my dad wasn't violent or but you went to work, you came home, you lost your temper. That's pretty much just what happened every day. And that was the range of emotions I understood. And I've always been a deeply emotional man. And for so long, right around this teenage and growing into those formidable years, man, I thought I was the only one. Like I thought something was deeply wrong with me for feeling very deeply. I felt sadness and I was a crier and I cared about people and I loved people and my feelings got hurt easily. And I just like, and at the same token, things made me very excited and very happy. And like, I had a lot of laughter. Like I was just I just had a lot of feelings. And now as an adult, I know, so does everybody else. So does everybody else. The only difference is like, you have to teach kids what these feelings are, what they mean, why they're having them, which ones need to be managed better. Yeah, right.
We need to learn this too.
and so as I'm getting older in my teenage years, and I have a lot of feelings, and I think I'm the only person, and I think I'm the only overweight kid, and so I start to feel very isolated. And in that isolation, just like a lot of teenagers, unfortunately, like again, had friends, internally isolated. But as a teenager, like discovered alcohol and drugs. And what I discovered in that process was I just figured out how to control the way that I feel. And that's what I became addicted to at a very young age, was controlling the way that I felt, because for so many years, I felt so different and so out of control with the way that I felt. So from 13, basically to skip a lot of it, from 13 to 22 was just a really rapid progression. Thank you. A really rapid progression of drug and alcohol addiction. By the time I was 22 years old, I was an IV heroin addict. I was smoking crack. I was homeless. I was going to die. I'd been in and out of treatment 3 or 4 times. I had been in and out of jail probably 10 times. Like never went like long-term prison or anything, but had a good couple of waking up in jail wondering how I got there moments. And my life was really, really, really going to end soon. There was really, like, looking back on it now, I can tell you that I don't, it's 100% God, but I have no idea how I'm even alive now. And, you said, what was the life-changing moment, right? So at 21, this was a year before I actually got sober, but at 21, my mom and my stepdad had moved to South Carolina and I stayed in New Jersey. I was supposed to move here, but I didn't because I could not leave my drug dealers. Like I wouldn't go. There's no way.
Right.
So they moved here at the day they left, I backed out. Like I was supposed to go and help with my younger brothers. And like, I was like 19 at the time. My brothers were like 10 and 8. My mom was like relying on me for some help. I committed to doing this. And at the last minute, I refused to get in the car. I was like, I'm addicted. There's no way. There's just no way. And I stayed behind. And from that 19 to 21 range is when things got really, really, really bad. Like once my mom and stepdad kind of left, like it was almost like my mom and my younger brothers were like the only thing. I was still addicted to drugs, but it hadn't like catapulted into that level. And like they were the kind of the reason why. And when they left, it was like off to the races. Long story short, at 21, I was homeless. I got kicked out of a treatment facility, and my aunt and uncle lived in South Jersey. And I called and asked if I could stay with them for a little while I got my shit together. I don't know if I can curse here, but I did. While I got my life together. And they said, okay. And they opened the front door. I finally got to their house. They opened the front door. And it was the first time anybody had seen me. Like I had track marks all down my arms, my hands. Like I don't know what I looked like, because when you're you don't look in the mirror a lot when you're in that place in your life.
No.
Whatever I looked like, my uncle looked at me and just started hysterically crying the minute he opened the door. And my aunt too. And I went to their couch and I passed out for like 16 hours. And I woke up and my mom was in the house. They called my mom. My mom packed her stuff and drove 13 hours from South Carolina to New Jersey overnight that night and was there in the house when I got up. And then she did everything she could to save my life. So she took me to my probation officer to find out what it would look like for me to move. My probation officer said, basically I got kicked out of the state of New Jersey. The deal was I had to leave or I was going to prison. I had failed every drug test. I'd been on probation since I was 17. So we're going on like 3 years of being on probation. I had never been able to come off because I kept getting arrested again. And my probation officer, who's absolutely a guardian angel in my life, said, you take him out of here and he never moves back, and I will remove him from the legal system here. But if he stays here, I'm sending him to prison today. He's done. Like, we're done. And I tell this story to just talk about the gravity of addiction. But my mom agreed. I agreed. We're leaving probation. And, I looked at my mom and I said, hey, I understand what's about to happen. I know we're moving. I know I'm leaving. I got to make one stop real quick. She was like, no, not making any stops anywhere. And I was like, no, really, I got to just make a quick 5-minute, like, say bye to a friend. She's like, you don't have any friends. You're a junkie. What do you, like, you have no friends. We're leaving. Yeah. I was so determined to get high one more time before I left that I looked at her, I apologized, I opened the door, and I jumped out of her moving vehicle. After this miracle of not going to prison, this miracle of being allowed to leave, this miracle, addiction, I jumped out. Getting clean was that first pivotal moment for me, that first turning point. That was the hardest thing that I had ever done at that point. So at 22, it was 2 years later, because I struggled.
So you jumped out, and then what happened? I got to finish the story. You jumped out, and then what happened? Oh,
yeah, sorry. I didn't want to, sorry, yeah. So I jumped out of the car, and I could not get any drugs. I spent 9 hours city to city to city, train to train to train, with the $23 I had in my pocket, and I could not get anything to get me high that day. And I waltzed in full of shame at like 2 o'clock in the morning back into my aunt and uncle's house. It was like the biggest, and I'm an addict. I could always get drugs. That was never the problem in my addiction. Mm-hmm. That day, nothing. I remember sitting in a parking lot. It was August at the time. And I remember sitting in a parking lot. It's like 103 degrees, waiting for this dealer to show up for like 6 hours, and I'm in like a hoodie and sweatpants, because that's what you got when you're that's what you're wearing. It was like the worst, most disgusting, horrible day trying to get drugs I had ever had. And it was the exact humbling, defeated day that I needed, because when I waltzed back into that house, I was ready to go. I was 100% ready to go. I wish the story was better from like a more entertaining perspective, but I think God lined that up exactly the way it was supposed
100%.
to. And so then we moved. And moving, this was the first time I ever left New Jersey. It was the first time I ever really moved. It was a big deal for me. And I came down and I got off the hard stuff. But I struggled with drinking, and I struggled with smoking weed, and I struggled here, and I just couldn't get clean. I couldn't lock into like nothing, Mm-hmm. And my mom had been going to 12-step meetings behind my back to learn about treating addiction, to learn about what people who get sober have to do to stay sober. And she was going to all these meetings, and basically like that's what saved my life. Is eventually I got into 12-step rooms, and I met people who had been clean, and I got a sponsor, and I worked the 12 steps. And that is what got and kept me, and has continued to keep me clean for the last 10 and a half years. But getting clean was the major turning point for everything that I now have in my life. Like even when I got into business coaching, I had people like, like, how long have you been doing this? So like, I was like, well, I've only been coaching business owners for about 2 months, but like I've been coaching humans for 9 years. Like, cause I got a sponsor at 12-month mark. I started sponsoring people. I had my younger brothers. I adopted these 2 kids, which we can get into if you want. Like I've always been somebody who wanted to help and care for people. I've always been a protector. And like when I got clean, the door was just bust open with opportunity to help other people. And I firmly believe in my heart that helping people consistently and intentionally for the last 10 years has been absolutely paramount in keeping me sober this entire time.
100%. 100%. I believe that. Yeah, totally. And I mean, I'm just like enthralled. So I'm sure the listeners are enthralled. It's quite the story. I love it. Because obviously there's a higher power at work that like, it's just so obvious to me, that you couldn't find drugs. Like a junkie can always find drugs. So yeah, that's so like random, like totally quote random. Air quotes there. Yeah, air quotes there. So then you got clean. Now you've gone from, I hate to say the fat kid to, you're really into fitness, you're married, you adopted your kids. How did you meet your wife? How did you get into fitness? Tell us a little bit about that story, because I know that's a huge part of your life.
It is a huge part. So like before my drug addiction took off in the 9th grade, I actually lost 100 pounds over a summer. I got super into it in high school. I got super fit, and then I got super into drugs, and fitness took a huge back burner. Sports took a huge back burner, obviously. And when I got clean, I was in really bad shape. I was fat again. I was soft. I just didn't like and I was only 22. So like I had every reason and right not to like the way my body looked for a 22-year-old. And like, it's as funny as it is, like genetically, like at my worst, I was still overweight. It didn't matter how little I ate or how many drugs I did. Like, I was not that skinny, skin and bones dude. Like, my body likes to be big. It just does. And I met my wife in recovery, actually. We met at a meeting on a Friday night. We started hanging out a little, like, in groups. You know, she had the kids. You know, our son was just a little baby. Like, he was 9 months old. Our daughter was only 4 at the time. And we started hanging out, and we fell in love with each other. That's really what happened. And we were both young and very stupid and very new to recovery and very new to being clean and very new to healthy relationships. And our relationship was not healthy in the beginning, but whatever God teed up for us was obviously very intentional. And I was staying in my mom and stepdad's house, which is a very, very nice house. My mom and stepdad have done very well for each other. Like, I'm not one of those people that can say like, oh, we, you know, grew up on the streets or anything like that. Like, they have a very nice house in Charleston. And my now wife was sleeping on the floor in her parents' garage in a very, very different house. Very, very, she comes from a very different background of moving a lot, not a ton of stability, not a ton of safety, not a ton of security. And I ended up basically moving into that garage with her to help her, like sleeping on the floor with her, like helping with the kids. And I can't, again, like I can't attribute it anything. I've always had it in my heart to like help people, protect people, serve people, provide security for people. It's just always been a part of me. And when I, you know, when God put her in my path, like that became the next step. And so after we dated for like a year, we decided we were going to move in together. It was the first time we had either one of us had moved in. And in that time, like, I really fell in love with the kids too. Like, I'm the only father that our son has ever known. Like, you know, our daughter, like, she remembers some, but the biological is not in the picture at all, period, like 0%. And so like, I started developing these relationships, and an opportunity came up to adopt them. So like, and like true parental right adoption, not just like on paper. So like, my name is on their birth certificate now. We went through like the full legal process. And it was really amazing because our daughter was probably 6 or 7 at the time, but she was old enough that the court system like needed her involved, like needed to get her feedback, needed to speak with her. She was old enough. And like, truthfully, like, I'm, you know, in the eyes of the court, I'm a stranger. I'm asking for someone else's name to be removed from a birth. It's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
And it was just such a beautiful experience. Like, the things that our daughter said about me, like, I didn't even know she felt that way. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just assumed she's like 6 and I'm doing I'm the guy who, like, I'm dad, but like, maybe not. I didn't really know 100%. And the things that like she communicated to the lawyer, because basically they assign like a guardian ad litem for the kids. Like, they basically mediate in representation of the kids, not a man, like not my wife and not me. They do like kids here. And then like, I have to prove. And she just said such beautiful, amazing things. And the adoption process couldn't have gone smoother. And it's beautiful. And so this does lead into the fitness thing, right? So I got a job in construction when I first got clean because I had nothing else to offer this world whatsoever. No skills, no degree, barely graduated high school. So I got into construction, and I could work as much overtime as I wanted. And so I was making $8 an hour, and at overtime I made 12. And I was like, I had made it. Because I went from homeless to like, I could make $12 an hour. Like, this is incredible. And I got really good at what I was doing. And I asked my boss one day, who was over the course of the 2 years I worked for him, he started having me help him run the company. I was handling sales. I was training new people. I was doing recruitment. I was handling operational stuff. But he was only paying me per job I completed. And so like, the more I helped, the less I was making. And I went to him one day and I was like, hey man, would you be willing? And I know this is a big ask, which is funny now that I say, but like, I know this is a big ask, but would you pay me $1,000 a week on salary? And I'll keep doing all this stuff for you. You can have me 7 days a week. I was so grateful to have a job. Like, I was like, you could have all of me. And he laughed in my face and said salary was for a special kind of employee, and I just wasn't that kind of employee yet.
Wow.
This was pivotal moment number 2. Something in my brain like snapped in that moment, and I had this realization. I was never going to put. I decided in that moment I was never going to put the financial future of my family in another man's hands ever again. And I put in my 30 days notice. I started my company. And I wasn't in the worst shape. I was not in good shape. I was like, nah. I was, adopting kids, and I had a wonderful fiance, and she's beautiful. So it was not like a huge, it's like the motivation wasn't really there. And after I started my business, within 3 years of starting my business, I basically ballooned up to about 300 pounds. All of my life became my business. I was not at home present with the kids anymore. I was not present with my fiance. I was not present for myself. I was smoking 2 packs of cigarettes every day, drinking energy drinks, eating gas station food, almost 300 pounds. And I woke up in the middle of the night one night in a legitimate panic attack because I had a dream that I died before I saw my daughter graduate high school. Just this weird, random, out of nowhere panic dream that I saw her at her graduation crying because I was not there. And I woke up in a panic, and that was December 2019. And I have been on that fitness journey since January 2019 without a single break. And we're going on 2024. Now, I've been super lean. I've been a little bigger, but I have been consciously eating, consciously training, consciously exercising. I quit smoking January 2nd, 2019. I haven't picked up a cigarette since. Within 2 weeks of that dream, I did the same thing I did when I had to get clean. And I radically rearranged all of the things that were killing me. And I removed them completely. I'm a complete. I know there is a thought process about incremental change. I'm not that guy. I am once I know for a fact this is providing zero benefit to my life, my family, my bank account, my spirit, it has to be gone. Because once I consciously know and I keep doing it, that's when guilt and shame set in. And I am a firm believer that guilt and shame will cause me to make more bad decisions than anything else in my life. So if I'm doing something consciously that makes me guilty and ashamed of myself, it has to go away. And so that was the start of that fitness journey. And I lost 100 pounds that year. 2019, I lost 100 pounds. And I've pretty much played between 25, 30 pounds of that weight for the last 3 years as I've kind of spent the time learning what I like about health and fitness. What food, how do I want to do this forever has kind of been the journey the last few years. But since 2019, I have not gone back to that old version of me. No smoking cigarettes. I was vaping. I quit vaping completely. I will have a cigar occasionally. I will absolutely admit that. But that is the extent of it. And so that has absolutely I say it changed to be honest, I don't even know how much it has actually impacted my future, but I believe I've added decades. I'm pretty sure I would have had a heart attack by 40 had I kept going down that track.
I'm sure you would have. Sounded like you were on the wrong track. That's for sure.
For sure.
What are some things that, if someone's listening to this, you're a very, listen to you, a very disciplined person, even though your discipline for a while was negative discipline, you're a very disciplined person. So one of the questions I always get is, how do you do the things that you know you should do on the days you quote don't feel like it?
I want to answer this, and I don't want it to sound arrogant, but it might as it comes out of my mouth. Nobody wants to do it ever. Nobody wants to. 90% of the time, I don't want to do most of the thing. I think people have this the question I get or hear in this category often is I think people assume I want every single day to be up at 5:30 in the gym by 6:30, eating a specific way. I think they think you think I don't think about man, I would like to shut all this down and play video games all day. You think that thought doesn't, it absolutely, the discipline is not in how do I teach myself to not have desires to relax, to not have desires to be lazy, and not that playing video games is lazy. If that's something for you, that's great. I do it sometimes too. And I think that's the other key is On Sundays, I go to church and I get coffee with my kids and I go to the sauna and I play video games with my son for like 3 hours. Like, I think people miss, or I think people, influencers, I'm not calling myself one, but influencers, I think, deeply misrepresent what their schedules actually look like, what things actually look like. Like, part of my discipline is shutting it down. I have dinner with my family pretty much 7 nights a week at about 6:30. I'm not working till 9. I'm not hustle grind culture work. And like I've been very successful in having boundaries. And so like, how do I do it when I don't want to do it? I do things that I enjoy as well. So like, I know that I know I don't like to wake up early. I know I don't want to train in the morning. I know there's some things I don't want to do, but to be quite honest with you, I really like taking my shirt off and seeing ab lines on my stomach. And so like, the trade-off, honestly, and like, let me be very clear, there have been many nights where I wanted to eat in an addictive way. I have wanted to eat the way I used to. There's been nights where I have slipped and eaten that way. But a lot of nights I have to tell myself, you want abs? You want more ice cream? Make a choice. You want those abs when you wake up tomorrow, or do you want that food? And I'm like, man, I want the abs. Like, I want the abs. And so I think there's a weird dichotomy where people are like, if you can stick to it long enough to just start seeing some results, the discipline starts to get easy because you're like, I want more of that. The results get addicting. I think the problem people have is they don't give it enough consistency over enough time to see it bear fruit in their life. And they're like, nah, I quit. Like, dude, if just stick to seeing some of the results, because once they come, the results are more addicting than the crap. Like, the physical fitness results become more addicting in the mirror than the food that gives me a 22-minute dopamine hit and then I don't feel good. Does that make sense? You gotta, like, I guess my short answer, play the tape all the way through. That's what they taught me when I got clean in recovery. Hey, if you want to relapse, play the tape all the way through. You might feel good for 10 minutes while you're hot. What happens after? What happens tomorrow? What happens if your parents catch you? What happens if your wife catches you? She leaving with the kids? Play the tape all the way to the end and then make a decision. And so I found that to be very beneficial. Like, so how do I do it when I don't want to? Like, play the tape out, man. Like, what happens if I skip the gym this morning at 3:00 in the afternoon? Am I going to be proud of myself, or am I going to take all day and obsess over the fact that I didn't show up for myself? Right?
So good. Yeah. So true too. So, you know, one of the things we talked about a little bit before, and I think this might kind of tie into what you're saying, is where does accountability and coaching help you, you know, become that best version of yourself? A lot of people are like, man, I could afford it, I'd get a coach. That's a common reason to not have a coach. Or they, you know, or they're like, they just don't want to be accountable to anyone, because I mean, that can kind of suck, I guess. What are some of your thoughts on that? And how would you help someone that's like, you know, they want to get better, but they're struggling with that mindset?
I think people actually avoid external accountability because they don't trust themselves to do the work. And so, like, often I hear people like, if I could afford it. And look, I think at times that is valid, except I often hear it from people like that I see at an event that had $1,000 event ticket, or I see in a group that has a $500 a month group fee. And I'm like, all right, so you don't have any additional funds for one-on-one mentorship. Okay. What about do you know how many free Facebook group accountability things you could be a part of? They're all over the place.
So many.
There's a million ways to be held accountable. I think the ultimate goal is self-accountability, right? So like, if all the coaching in my life was wiped out for some unknown reason today, I believe I could continue down the track that I'm on. But with my coaches, I believe I can press time by decades. So I have a fitness coach. I pay hundreds of dollars a month. I have my business coach that makes thousands of dollars a month. I have accountability with my wife for our marriage and our parenting. Like, I surround myself with accountability. And I think people avoid it because they're afraid they're not going to follow through. And they're actually more afraid of letting you down than they actually care about letting themselves down. That's a good thing if you're willing to hire that person. Because if you are actually more afraid of that, like when I hired coaches for the first time, the thing that drove me to do the work was I cared about your judgment of me. I was only doing the work because I didn't want to look like a guy who didn't do the work to you. That was helpful at the time.
Mhm.
I would love to have said I've never cared what people think about me. Bullshit. Of course I've cared what people. I care about what my wife thinks about me. I care about what my mentor thinks about these things. Of course I care. We're humans. How do you not? We're built to care what the people we love and love us think about us.
Mhm.
I just think people need to step out, like, and I hate to say it, but like, if you are unwilling to be held accountable in any capacity, then you don't actually want what you are saying that you want. That desire is not great enough. Think and Grow. I could name book after book after book that go into great detail about desire being at the forefront of any result. But if you don't truly desire it, wake up in the middle of the night, panic attack, desire it. Like life or death, get clean, desire it. You're not going to get it. You're not going to get it.
That's so good, man. I know we could go forever, but I always have three final questions, and then anything we leave our listeners with. Guys, we'll have all of Sam's information in the show notes. Do reach out to him. I know you get a lot of value. He's on Instagram, he's on Facebook, I believe, all the things. We'll have all that in the show notes. And he has a podcast, which is super cool. So three final questions. And then, like I said, anything that we didn't touch on that you just really wanted to get out there. First one is, if someone's looking for their purpose, what's one sentence that you could say that could help them find their purpose?
Explore a relationship with a higher power. That's my sentence.
Love it. So cool. Number two, and I'm sure you have more than one, but what one comes to mind? What's a favorite quote and why?
You know, you're asking me things now. I feel like I should have been prepared. I'm going to be 100% honest with you. Like, I'm not a quote guy. So okay. I don't have a favorite quote. I don't remember, like, my brain doesn't work that way. So I don't have one. My favorite quote right now is, I like when my wife tells me she loves me. That's my favorite quote.
Oh, I love that. That's so cool. Third one is, what's one word or sentence you want on your gravestone?
I would like people to remember that I set a standard for the people around me.
That's a good one. I like that. All right. So you run into someone in a coffee shop and they're like, hey, Sam, that was so awesome. Like, you know, they're either overcoming addictions or they're working on being the best version of themselves or whatever. And we, you know, listen to that. We got all these things. What's something that we didn't touch on that you just think people really need to sink their, you know, teeth and thoughts into?
We talked about addiction. We talked about all of this in a nutshell came down to me being willing to learn how to love myself. And so if I was to say, like, anything that we really didn't like talk about, but really that this all encompasses, is like, I had to learn to love me enough to care about me. And it was progressionary. I loved me just enough to not kill myself. That was step one. Then I loved me just enough to accept love from my now wife. And like, that was progressionary. Then I loved me just enough to quit smoking and lose a couple pounds. And then I loved me just enough to lose a bunch of pounds. Then I loved me just enough to, you know, I loved me just enough to start a business. But then I loved me enough to exit that business and start going deeper into my purpose, which was coaching, consulting, and one-on-one work with human beings, and not just selling construction and home service products. And so that would be my thing, is really dial in loving yourself, and then be okay that it is a lifelong process, a progressionary lifelong process.
That's so good. Guys, I know you'll want to share this, so please share, rate, review, subscribe, all the things. If we go out there and we change one life for one starfish at a time, together, we can change the world. Thanks so much for being on, Sam.
Thank you.